Hi guys, Miss Francis here today to discuss population genetics with you. Population genetics allowed the perspective of Mendelianism and Darwinism to be reconciled. It provided a genetic basis for variation and natural selection, and what it did was allow us to apply mathematics to Darwin's and Mendel's ideas. So before we jump into determining allele frequencies within a population's gene pool, let's define a few key vocabulary words. A population is a group of individuals that belong to the same species, whereas species are members that have the potential, or individuals that have the potential to interbreed and produce fertile offspring. A gene pool is the sum total of genes in a population, and it consists of all the alleles at all gene loci or loci, which means location, in all individuals of a population. So let's take a look at an example. Imagine we have a wildflower population with two flower colors. So let's imagine that the allele for red flower color is completely dominant, represented by a capital R, to the allele for white flowers, represented by a lowercase r. Now let's say that we've got a population of 500 flowers, and in that population, 20 of them are white, meaning that they are homozygous recessive. So that leaves 480 plants that have red flowers. Those red flowers could be heterozygous, represented by a capital R, lowercase r, or they can be homozygous, represented by two capital R's. And we're given the added information that 320 are homozygous dominant and 160 are heterozygous dominant. And the question is, what is the frequency of the R allele? So let's write this out. We've got 500 plants, and these plants are diploid. So that means that we've got 1,000 alleles. Now they're also telling us that 20 of them are white. 20 of them are recessive, having little r and little r. 480 of them are dominant. They are red. Out of those 480 of them, we've got 160 of them that are heterozygous, and then you've got 320 of them that are homozygous. Capital R, homozygous dominant. And they want to know the frequency of the capital R allele. So in the case of the 160 heterozygotes, they can only give us one capital R allele for a total of 160 alleles. In the case of the homozygous dominant colored plants, they give us two capital R alleles. So that gives us a total of 640 capital R alleles for a total of 800 capital R alleles. Now, out of the whole population, though, this is 800 over 1,000. Well, 800 over 1,000 gives us 0.8, and if we were to convert that to a percentage, that gives us 80% have the capital R allele. Now, if they were to ask us the frequency of the little r allele, what's that going to be? That's just going to be 1 minus the frequency of the dominant allele, which would be 0.2. And then if we wanted to convert that into a percentage, we would just multiply it by 100 and we would get 20%. So that's how we could figure out the frequency of an allele within a population. And this is just in words, the description of what we just did mathematically. Now, if that frequency of the dominant and the recessive allele changed, well, what would that indicate? That would indicate that evolution is actually happening. So there were these two scientists, Hardy and Weinberg, and they proposed this theorem, playing devil's advocate. They said, well, if I hold these following conditions to be true, then I have a non-evolving population. So their theory states that the frequencies of alleles and genotypes in a population's gene pool are going to remain constant over generations, provided these 5 conditions exist. So if these conditions cannot be held true, then evolution must be the force of change. So what are these 5 conditions? Well, the 5 conditions of the Hardy-Weinberg theory are that there is a large population size, that there is no migration, meaning there's no movement in or out, that there are no mutations, that there is random mating, meaning that mates do not pick one another, and lastly, that there is equal reproductive success. In other words, there's no natural selection, that every single offspring has an equal opportunity or an equal chance of being successful. Oh, fuck a duck.